so you want to tap it till it. Okay, here we go. Oh, we don't move this. All right, good. Good afternoon. It is 2:12 on August 8th, Tuesday, and I will call this board briefing meeting to order. Board members, we have some legislative priorities to talk about, several policies, and then public comment in our comments. So we'll begin with legislative priorities. Ms. Patricia, you are the liaison. Do you want to do an intro?
Yeah, so I don't really know that I am the liaison because our liaison is appointed in November. So I wanted to talk about this and get board consensus that we, on a couple of things. The first is that we change when we appoint our board liaison.
Okay.
Right now, I'm just the board liaison for the FSBA. And then in November, we choose a board liaison separately for state and federal issues.
Okay.
So what I'd like to propose is that we change the timing so that it is as near as practicable after the end of session or after the end of special session, and that whoever the board appoints, that board liaison be responsible for federal and state issues, dealing closely with the FSBA, the consortium, and the new person we're hiring for government relations.
And so then that carries over to the fall and the opening.
So, yes, so instead of at our reorganization meeting in November, us deciding who that person will be, we would decide after the end of session or special session, and then that person would continue in that role through the next end of session, and either we would appoint somebody new or reappoint the existing person. Does that make sense?
Mr. Toiber?
It does, and I understand your pragmatics about it. The only issue is that in November, typically, especially in even years, there'll be new board members.
Right.
And so you block out, for example, for the November of 18, 4 of the 7 board members will be different, or may be different, potentially. I'm hoping they're not. But there potentially, we could have 4 new board members, and so you'd lose their opportunity to be able to be liaison. Now, argument can be had during their first year, are they adept enough and knowledgeable enough of the issues to do it? That's a good argument as well. So I'm not one way or the other. I was just making that point. I happen to agree with Ms. Patrica, and also the fact is that even first-year members, it's a very complex thing to be legislative liaison, and I would defer to a senior board member anyway. So I don't have a problem with it. I just want to throw it out there.
Ms. La Riviere?
Just a point that is, I believe, is noted and changed in our reorganization, and I guess, Mary, you and Susan will have to assist us with looking at that. I believe that with regard to the state liaison, the date was changed so that the November, it states that the state liaison was selected in July. So that decision was made in July, and that was a decision that previous board made when FSBA made their changes in rules. I am trying to pull up that chart so that I might be able to, to see if I might be able to see that piece with regard to it, but that's the only one position that was changed so that it would happen in July to coincide with the FSBA. Our state liaison has always been the same person who is the FSBA liaison. Now, the other question is, do we want, so it's always, that's the way it's always fallen into place.
Okay. Ms. Morgan, are you with us?
I am.
Good, and you're on your cell phone, and I'm not hearing any feedback, so that's good. Do you want to weigh in on this?
No, I have no comment. I think it's true that it makes more sense to do this so that it matches up with session.
Okay. Any other comments? Here's my suggestion, that we bring that topic back when we have our full board together at a briefing meeting in that decision. Is that okay with it? I'm not comfortable with making that decision unless we're all together.
Well, I'm just not really clear on what my role is and how I'm supposed to be working, or if I'm supposed to be working with.
Can I chime in?
Thank you.
I'm essentially done over. And as I understood it, the board selected Ms. Patrica as the FSBA rep. And I assumed that I would now work with her relative to legislative session for 2018. Ms. Patrica, in erring on the abundance of caution, essentially was not sure if that meant that, and I think Ms. LaRiviere attempted to clarify this, does that mean she is now the legislative liaison to work with myself and Mr. Sarah and the superintendent for the 2018 legislative session?
That's the
Ms.
way.
Ms. Fisher assumed that was the case. I think Ms. Patrica is just trying to clarify that with you all. So, but I will say this, I do need some clarity because I need to know who to work with on the board, along with Mr. Sarah. And Ms. Fisher alluded to the fact that she was no longer that person because the session is over and we're moving forward to 2018.
So in the past, so she is saying she's stepping down because the session is over, which is really what you're proposing.
Right.
That when the session is over, then the new person come in.
That's right.
On the other hand, in November, the person that's appointed at the end of session may not be here because of a changeover in, so I think there are some other issues in terms of, too, maybe how we appoint our board liaison with the idea that we should maybe look at a 2-year term so that the board liaison will be there over that period of time. And then at the end of that 2 years, we'll see who's on the board and who will have another 4 years or 2 years.
And typically, we have been making it a 2-year term. So I believe it was 2 years ago that we always had, FSBA coordinated their change in November. But then when state legislature started earlier sessions, they decided, okay, we're going to change it so it will begin with our FSB, whoever you send for the FSBA rep, and in most of the school boards, whoever's the FSBA rep is also their state liaison rep. That's just for them as a board. So the aspect of that whole change was so that it would coincide with prepping, developing your priorities, and moving forward. I believe those of us who had been on the board understood that and were very comfortable. What has happened, and I suggested to Ms. Patrica, I said we may want to consider within protocols and procedures having there be a component there that has it delineated so that everyone, whenever they come on, knows how it will be. It's a 2-year term, just like all of the other positions are 2-year terms for our advisory committees and so on.
Ms. Patrick, are you comfortable with it? Did you think about it as a 2-year term?
I thought about it as an annual with either a new appointment or a reappointment, but 2 years is fine.
And that stays then with what has been happening. And then the second issue is you're not sure what you should be doing. So Mr. Dodig, can you?
I think, I'm not going to speak for Ms. Patrica, but I just need to know who to work with. That's essentially the clarity. I see Ms. LaRiviere pointing at Ms. Patrica. We have already consulted with each other relative to the priorities, just so you know, even though we were not sure exactly. But Ms. Patrica, in the erring on the side of transparency, wanted to bring it to you all to discuss, and I think that's why we're here today.
That's
Exactly.
just to formalize, I guess, what we've already been doing, even though it wasn't necessarily in conjunction with our rules. That's the first thing. The second thing is putting federal and state issues. I'd like to handle both federal and state. And since that reappointment doesn't come up until November, do I have your support to do it now? Can I start to take over federal issues now?
That would be, at this point, Mr. Twigger has been in that role. And so that would be a conversation.
Now, you just said you don't think a first-year board member is good, and I am a first-year board
No,
member, but I'm like,
Yeah, no,
quarters of a
yeah,
first-year
no,
board
I meant that what I meant is a new board member gets elected on the board in November and then assumes that role without spending time on the board and learning the dynamics and going through a legislative session, not as the point person.
okay, so
And you've
then,
already done that, so.
so then we have consensus?
Yes. Yeah, Ms. Giovanelli? Uh-huh. Good, Ms. Morgan? Okay.
Okay,
Everybody in
and
agreement?
along with that, then as the alternate, the same alternate for federal and state? So we just say legislative liaison blanket?
Federal and state, and we have the appointee and the alternate.
Okay.
All right,
So-
and then the last question I have surrounding that is, how do you want me to update you as a board? Can I mostly do written unless something is very important, and then I'll bring it to you
A briefing.
orally at a meeting? Is that okay?
Okay,
Memos are good, and it's nice if we have it in writing, because then it's easier for us to reflect.
right, and back up.
And I also think that's the way it's worked for for Sarah's as well. You provide it to us by the emails when it comes out of session, and I think Mr. Doty for that as well. You guys could disseminate the information as you get it,
Yes.
links to it.
I think the main thing will be, you will share with us what happens whenever there are those legislative meetings with, with
Now,
Mr.
do
Doty.
you have an alternate? Is there an alternate?
Pam
Alternate
was
had been voted on for
the
me.
FSBA alternate, so if we're following the same thing we've been following all along, then Pam would be the alternate.
And I am willing to, if there's somebody who would rather be the alternate, you know, I am fine making a change. But I don't mind being the alternate as well.
Okay, we all set? Thank you. Dodig
Okay.
and Mr. Sarah.
All right, Dr. Kuckel, Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Sarah, and I are here today to discuss the board's legislative priorities for the 2018 legislative session. As you know, session begins in January, so time is of the essence in this regard. During your workshop in late June, you all came up with 2 distinct board priorities. Those have been articulated by Mr. Sarah on page 5 of the briefing documents. Pages 3 and 4 of the documents represent the proposed priorities for the Greater Florida Consortium of School Boards and the FSBA.
Okay.
With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Sarah and the board if you have any questions.
Starting with the, what's the one-page proposal for the local platform, we did have a workshop. We had facilitators. Those facilitators did a fantastic job, both of capturing everything that was said and then organizing that into a meaningful document of what it meant. And largely, the 2 bullets here that represent the positions are lifted straight from that work, and then there are several bullets to create a logical explanation and justification for moving forward. I put that to you for any discussion, but this would be, we wanted a Lee County focused platform, and both of those bullets are absolutely local issues with a local focus, and they're not statewide issues, they're not regional issues. They are clearly your platform and your 2 items.
Mr. Toiber.
Are we going to go as far, Bob, as to have, with Mr. Dodig's help and Ms. Patricka's, to actually draft legislation to address the Capital Growth Fund?
Yes, we'll need some help from additional staff in our facilities and planning. There is a formula. There's a couple of different ways that this can be addressed, the same way as when we did the local bill to expand the board. And ultimately, what we ended up with was totally different than what was originally drafted. But we intend to have a draft that would amend what is currently in statute as the high growth district capital outlay grant. And we will look at amending that formula in a way that would bring Lee County in. And then separately, we would need to work for budget for that item. Now, that item is likely to involve more than just one district. Right now, the way that language is worded, it only impacts Osceola. We would need to get some amendments to that language that would broaden who is eligible, and then the funding for that would be at a statewide level to impact those 5 or 6 high-growth districts that would then qualify. But we're looking for language there, but there's also the possibility of addressing it in a few other different ways, including a couple of years they've had essentially turkey projects that were funded single districts that were for new construction. That may be another way of looking at it. On the first item, it is more than just grow your own. This is really looking at all of the elements that you have going into your teacher recruitment and retention program locally, and putting together a program, a request for local funding for that initiative so that it could be done in a way that could be modeled statewide, that we would model it, and it could be replicated and expanded if the state wanted to in future years.
Ms. LaRiviere?
I also believe that within that bullet, under that heading, as I look at the other aspects, we could also use that. I'm trying to come up with a good argument as to why this plan works much better than the Best and Brightest does.
It may actually work.
I know, isn't
That's
that
a good point.
Very valid point.
And I think if I could just weigh in on that quickly, I think, and I had some conversation with Ms. Patrica and Mr. Sarah, and also had drafted some language that talks about performance, because Best and Brightest doesn't talk about performance. And I think this board and the legislature can get behind performance. They have for years. So then why are we just giving money for test scores? And I think that may be an approach.
Mr. Toiber?
And I don't want to, again, I make sure I'm not getting confused, but I thought number one, as far as our recruitment is, and I wonder if we can actually use it in with our campaign, recruiting money to actually make an awareness, but actually to go out and make the public and the state and the legislature all at the same time understand the current pressing need of our lack of teachers statewide, nationwide. That we need to make it so, because people hear it, but they still don't get it. And they hear it and they still don't realize the impact. And they hear it and they don't realize the criticality of it. And I think that we need to go out there, talk about with Morgan with his marijuana campaign. I mean, it was just, it was a shotgun, and it was a subject matter that we go out there and say, we've got a critical issue in the state of Florida. The legislators, they don't perceive that as a problem right now. They're looking at funding and performance, but they don't see that as a problem, how it will negatively affect the economy of the state of Florida. When people can't come here and put their kids in schools, in high-performing schools, they just won't come. It doesn't matter what business you own, you're not gonna, that's one of the first three questions people ask when they are moving a business down to Florida, is how are your schools? And when it becomes a statewide problem, not just Lee County, it becomes and it is a statewide problem. But if we come up with, there's a problem, and so that's half of the emphasis is that there's a problem, so everybody understands there's a problem. And then the other half is we have a solution that is vetted, and here's our plan. And then we go out and present that to make that a statewide adoption, but then the state adopts it as a statewide plan. We just have to be the ones leading the brigade. So I kind of think that's at least where my mind's at, is more of an educational program to say, look, we've got a problem. Legislators hear problems all day long, but it's like once they see the problem and accept the problem, then it's like, and here's the solution, and that's kind of where I think that our emphasis needs to be.
Right.
Ms. Morgan, if you'd like to say anything, just indicate speak or something, and then I'll call on you next, okay?
Very good, thank you.
Ms. LaRiviere?
And the other thought that occurs to me is, never mind, we'll leave it there. But at some point, we need to think about how we do this with our administrators. And how because they went into Best and Brightest now for administrators. That really is not going to be, doesn't relate to what goes on in the schools.
Ms. Patrica?
We really tried to focus this on what was discussed and decided at the workshop.
Correct.
So,
No,
and
I
I
get that.
have some suggestions later during this briefing about things to think about for next year.
Good.
But for this year, I think this is where we all decided where we'd be on these two issues. Right?
Dr. Atkins?
Well, and just relative to number one and a little bit to Mr. Toiber's point, one of the things I would and maybe Bob, you have the answer to this right off the top of your head, but one of the concerns that I continue to have is that even the Department of Education continues to assume that this is a non-issue. And I'm not sure what they're basing that on, whether it's the number of certificates issued, if that's what the rationale is. But the case that we have to make is that, I mean, I think if you read like the Community Post, Ken Savage wrote an article, and he talks about in that article the exceptional teacher and how it's critically important to, if you really want to increase student achievement, close the achievement gap, you have to go out and recruit that exceptional teacher. So that is not just anybody who gets issued a certificate, that is somebody who's a proven commodity. So that is what we are after. The other piece is, I think that, you know, one of the things we want to look at as a community is providing our youth opportunity moving into the workforce. And one of the things that Grow Your Own does is it supports our youth, our students, and being able to provide them with a full scholarship to go to a college and university here locally and then come back and teach and start out, as we discussed earlier, $40K, you know, in the just starting out in the classroom. So I really think this is a workforce issue also, and it also gets to a growing American problem of increased student debt coming out of college, because it helps to eliminate that. I mean, this is a win-win-win, and ultimately it goes back in the classroom and helps the next generation of kids because it provides them high-quality educators. So I think educating the Department of Education and our local delegation to do not accept simply what your leadership is telling you, what even the Department of Education is telling you. We're telling you that is wrong because we do have a shortage of teachers. We see it every single day, and it will improve the quality of life here in Lee County if we invest in our kids. And I think it's a 1.6 times investment. I'm pretty sure that's correct, but for every dollar, you know, you're getting like $1.60 back. So, you know, kids are a great investment in your own community.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. Any other comments?
So what we're asking is for consensus to bring these back to you on the 22nd to the regular meeting for you all to vote on them. In the meantime, you can start talking about them. And then we'll work with Ms. Stillwell's office to get typically it's a flyer or a document that you can provide to folks with the two priorities for the legislative session coming up.
I might add one more role in there, and that is to begin recruiting sponsors from both the House and the Senate. That, I mean, if we do that early on, then they can be part of the development and getting the word out, and hopefully so when it does come forth for a vote or review, that we'll have people on our side and we'll know that we do. Ms. LaRiviere?
Federal. Haven't we in the past had our federal priorities as well as our state?
Typically, we have not done the federal priorities in July.
Okay, so then those would be voted on and approved, or haven't we ever addressed it?
It's really on an as needed
needed
basis.
basis.
So I think I would work with Mr. Dodig and
Okay,
Chris
thank you.
to develop your priorities for
All
next
right.
year.
Right.
Board members, anything else? Well, I think you have some direction. Anything else you need?
Well, and I just wanted those items on this page 5 of your agenda are what's coming back to you to get adopted in a couple of weeks at your next board meeting. Then we had a page and a half of items that are the proposals to submit to the Greater Florida Consortium. They follow a pattern of what the issue is, then you explain what the proposed change is, and you have your justification. The items here, the teacher recruitment and retention relates to the project that was in your local platform, but it is a more statewide based solution to it. The other items in deciding to have a very local board platform, those items aren't necessarily appropriate for the consortium or FSBA, and so We took items that were from previously adopted platforms that I believe you still believe in, and I recommend them to you unless there's any one of these items that you wish to not have submitted. Those are our proposals for what would go into the consortium. And the deadline on that is, I think we're
It's coming
like
up.
9 days from that deadline, 9 or 10 days, so I'll get that submitted for you.
Comments, questions, suggestions?
The consortium and the FSBA, right?
That is true, and the FSBA doesn't do theirs in this format. They have a chart that you fill in, but these would be the items that we would recommend, that would
Okay.
be the prospective
Thank you.
items.
Okay? All right, you're all set.
Thank you.
Just one quick comment relative to the board legislative priorities. One of the things that I've shared with some of you is that we are working with staff, Dr. Carla and Lauren Stillwell, and also we've got Darcy Eichenberg, who's a community member who's agreed to help work on individual board member presentations so that when you go out in the community, you can really focus on strategic plan and legislative priorities and also back that up with a definite ask. Dr. Pruitt has been involved in this as well, putting together, where are there different community groups, organizations, Rotary, Realtors Associations, Chambers of Commerce, and so forth, and then we'll be working with you on a schedule to be able to get everybody out there in support of your legislative priorities to really focus on getting the message out.
Mr. Torber?
I would just ask, the FSBA and the consortium priorities are basically, and Bob, you probably saw it, probably that's the reason why you did it, but are all pretty much focused on the HB 7069. I mean, they're all local control, charter, and so on. So I think those should be talking points and to be able to answer, because those questions will come up in the public on their own. But I would like, at least from my own preference for the board, and I'd like to have board input to see how they feel. Ms. Kathleen can also talk in on the cell phone if she's on as well. But to actually take our 2 points to get to be the emphasis of those talking points, because those are the two that we want the business community rallying behind our grow your own and the fact of our critical shortage, and we want them also, as far as the growing districts, as far as the investments in our buildings are something for the community's sake. So I think that's where our emphasis should be, but be prepared to address these other issues, which I think will be heating up over the next 8-9 months anyway.
Primary focus and secondary. The primary would be R2 and the secondary then would be the
Exactly.
backup for FSBA. Okay?
Yeah, I think that's the point. I think that the entire point is for us to get out there in the community, and like you said, have a specific ask in there. What is the ask? Is it to send an email to, or to call our state delegation, or whatever? This is how we're gonna make grassroots change. We're gonna get out in the community and ask them to support us.
And at some point in time, we should probably take some time or ask Lauren to lead us in that direction by contacting different organizations. They are always looking for speakers.
And that's
And,
what I
to-
think
to
Dr.
set up
Atkins just,
Okay?
yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Okay? Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks,
Mr.
Bob.
Sarah. Safe trip back. We shall move on to now our Chapter 2 policies. And Dr. Atkins is somebody who's going to present those.
I'm here.
We've got Soretta Ralph, Rob Dodick, and Dr. McCullers are going to help with our policy 2.01, et cetera. So, Mr. Dodick.
Yes, thank you. Previously, we pre-briefed 2.01, 2.04, and 2.05. There was one question from Ms. Fisher about dogs on campus. I believe I addressed that. Those policies didn't have any further discussion. And so therefore, I'm willing to answer any questions you may have about them, but and without any substantive changes, those would come before you for public hearing on August 22nd. But if you have any questions about those three initially,
Board
I'm here to
members?
answer them.
Anything? I do have one suggestion, not a question, but a
Yep.
suggestion. On the board policy for, and I lost mine. Anyway, I have it here in front of me. The very first one related to district sign-in.
Yes.
My suggestion with that is that we add into there how how community people, other than students and staff, have access to our buildings. That is also our responsibility to make sure access from outsiders either goes through the office, where there are folks there to greet them and make sure they sign in, or somebody at the door to make sure that we know who they are and that they have the proper badges or whatever they would need to enter the school part of our building.
I believe, and Mr. Martin may want to chime in, but the
Number 3.
security of facilities policy is later in this chapter.
Okay,
I think that's what you're talking about.
right.
And I think paragraph 3 of that policy essentially addresses what you're suggesting is needing, indicating that an individual who's not a student in good standing, a teacher or an employee of that school
Right.
must register at the principal's office, must check in.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we have well stated that that any visitors that come in need to only have access during the school day at a place where there is somebody to recognize them, have them sign in, give them the proper credentials.
A single point of access, essentially. Yes. And I do believe that's in a policy later in the chapter
Okay.
regarding the security
That
of our
works.
facilities.
We'll
Mr.
watch for that.
Dobson's, those are his policies, so.
Okay. Any other comments, board members? Okay.
All right. Next is 2.03, which did generate some discussion last meeting. Mr. Martin and I came up with language to paragraph 2, which I think should, and Mr. Martin deserves more of the credit than I do for drafting this, which I think may prove to satisfy the concerns of the board members that did have concerns regarding that.
Board members?
I'm pleased, very good.
Okay. Next one?
I think that's it for me. I will be back to brief 2.03 at the next meeting, and I believe Ms. Brooks and Ms. Robery and Ms. Mackey are next.
Good. Please come forward.
Thank you.
Student progression plan and special programs and procedures. We'll begin with student progression plan. Dr. Atkins, do you have an intro to that?
No intro, I'll just turn it right over to Ms. Brooks and Mackia and Robery.
Okay. You're on.
Sorry, we thought we had that pulled up in advance. So good afternoon, board members, Superintendent Atkins. We are here to do the briefing today on the student progression plan. We did the pre-briefing with you previously on July 25th. And at that time, we went through some of the major changes. We do have included in your backup material the PowerPoint that was presented previously, as well as a copy of the student progression plan. And so we're just here to kind of see if you guys have any additional questions at this time for briefing, and then otherwise our next steps will be the public hearing on August 22nd.
Board members, comments, questions? And I don't have any, Miss Morgan?
No, I have none.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was quick. And Mr. Bradley and Jackie Turner? Another long and involved document. And kudos to for both documents. They're very well done and organized. Who's going to begin?
Thank you, Ms. Conkle, and members of the board. Dr. Atkins. We're pleased to bring to you today for public hearing the ESE Special Programs and Procedures, also known as the SP and P, not to be confused with the previous document. And so today we'd just like to share with you a few things about the document and answer any questions that you may have. This is our compliance document. It's required by the state for the operation of exceptional student education under IDEA and for the reception of IDEA funds. And so the document provides the guidance and compliance requirements for the district.
Every year, DOE will provide us a template with the major core content, and we make the minimal changes. Everything that you see in the document in the text boxes is what we've added as a district. The other information is all put in by DOE in accordance with the new rules and regulations that have been established in Tallahassee. This year, we had very minimal changes, so this is going to be very short today. The process was delayed by the Department of Education. This is for the 16-17 school year, so we're a little late with this. But DOE kept adding additional requirements as the year went on due to a class action lawsuit that was filed against several districts in the state over the MTSS process, which we'll get to in a couple of slides. And we weren't involved in the class action lawsuit, thank goodness. But it did cause us to have to put in additional information. So we received approval from DOE on our document for last school year in May of 2017.
So again, as Ms. Turner has stated, the changes were very minimal. We had some changes in Part 1, Section A6, just updating our restraint data and our restraint goal.
This was the section that required the most changes that they sent to us in December. We needed to explain more clearly our problem-solving, decision-making process during the MTSS process, and we also needed to further explain how we ensure that parents are involved in the MTSS process and how we communicate with parents.
Board members? Mr. Bradley, continue.
You have gifted.
Oh, I have the next slide too. It's about gifted. Each year we need to discuss strategies that we're going to use to increase our underrepresented populations and our students who are gifted. And if you look at the data, you can see that our students who are ELL are significantly underrepresented in our students who are gifted population. So this year, what we're going to try is at a few pilot schools, do a universal screener for students at the end of the first grade year, and do a universal screening for gifted with all students in first grade, and see who we're missing in that population, and see how that works.
You said that's at specific targeted schools?
Not yet, but we want to look at those schools that have the higher ELL populations of students, so we can really target those underrepresented groups.
Okay.
The remaining revisions were minimal, just updates in language, procedures, statutory references, and
Bless you.
we included the BPI assessment, that's best practice in inclusive education, results, and that was added as Appendix F. That's available as an attachment for download. And this completes our revisions for the year. And at this time, are there any questions?
Board members, anybody? Ms. Morgan?
No, I have none.
Well, thank you. Another well-done document, and we look forward to working with that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to your team who helped you with it. Let them know.
The next item on our agenda is public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to public comment? We just have one. The microphone is yours.
Thank you. Congratulations, Chris, on becoming the liaison. I think you do an excellent job. That being said, There is one way that you're going to win this fight with this legislature, and that is to threaten to leave the state school system. You get right down to it. Anybody who saw Heather Fitzenhagen speak last week knows that she's not on your side. She has no intention of joining your side. And education is not a grave concern of hers. And if you were there, you heard her say it with her own lips. So the state legislature is controlled by Americans for Prosperity, Club for Growth, and all of these interest groups that are libertarian in their thinking, and there is no original constitutional charter for schools, so therefore somehow they believe that educating children is not really a public thing. And that is really the heart of this thing that you're fighting against. It's ridiculous, but it exists. And it's the truth. If you really look what's going on nationwide and in the state, these groups are in there lobbying and putting forth their crazy agendas, and they're buying these. Every one of our state legislatures is filled to the brim with special interest money. That's what funds their campaigns and what gets them elected. It's exactly what it is. So you're not gonna send Bob Sarah up there and win anything unless you determine that you will leave the state system and get treated fairly, because the Constitution of the state of Florida says that this board will educate the children and be the ones who figure out how to do it, not the state legislature. They got the power in '73 when they were able to do the FEFP to make sure all the equal funding because of the and that in itself is a good thing, but they have systematically taken over schools to where a teacher can even decide what is best for their student sitting there that day. They have to follow some program called Common Core or whatever. I'm not saying Common Core is all that bad, but it has things about it that take the teaching away from the teacher. You're not going to win this fight unless this board gets out there and, one, threatens the legislature that you're going to leave the school system and mean it, and two, until this board gets out there for real and actually starts working. Going to BUPAC and Kiwanis and everything's good, but you're going to have to get out there and open the door and get people to come to you to listen because they care about their school system. And that's what it's going to take. You're going to have to do it at night. You're going to have to put the sign out there, and you yourself are going to have to be appealing enough to get those people there. And if you don't think you can do it, you should get off the board, because that's what it's going to take to win this fight. This is a political fight. This is a gunfight. This isn't a lobbying, niceness or anything like that. They don't respect you, and they are trying to get rid of public schools. That is exactly what's going on. So no more, sorry, Steve, but saying, oh, we didn't see this coming. Oh, yeah, you did. You just weren't paying attention. It's been coming for a long time.
Thank you,
Anybody?
Mr. Fox, your time
Is that
is
it?
up.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And thank you for continuing to stay involved on our advisory committees and joining our board and speaking to us. We are well aware of that. How to do it is always the big question, but thank you so much. Any other comments, board members? Well, we will go to board member comments then. And let's start with Ms. Giovanelli.
I'm excited about school starting, I guess, and it's going to be a busy year. And I don't really have anything until I got a busy week. I've committed to go into a couple in the morning. That's going to kill me. But I'm excited.
Thank
So
you.
that's fine.
Ms. Patrica?
Okay, so I have a few things. First, Mr. Martin, excellent memo, I think, about the differences between the application of ethics laws to us as school board members as compared to our state legislators. The information you provided was very concise and detailed. I really appreciate the work. And I am, I think, alarmed after having read the memo. And I mentioned earlier that I was going to plant the seed with this board that we think about adopting this as part of our platform for next year. I don't know that we need to focus just on academics or education. I think one of the reasons why the state is able to do what they're able to do is because they can vote for legislation that benefits them and their family members. So I'm just planting that seed now for next year, and I'll talk about it more next year. Strategic Planning Steering Committee, I was a fill-in for Mrs. Morgan at that. The meeting was fantastic. It was another reminder for me, or a not needed reminder. I guess I hadn't been with district staff a lot recently, so it was a great reminder for me of just how talented and passionate the people are who work in this building. And it was also fantastic to see community involvement, especially in July, when so many people are out of town. So, Dr. Carlin, you did a great job running that meeting, keeping us on task and on time, and I appreciate that. It was really a great experience. I left there. I think I said to you on the way out, that was fun. Didn't I say that on the way out? It was fun. I attended 3 open houses this year, and granted, they're open houses from my own children's schools, but I think they are probably indicative of what's happening across the district, which was clean buildings, excited teachers, and order. There was a lot of order at the open houses. People knew where to go and what to do, and I'm not going to say my kids are excited for a new school year because every kid hates it when summer ends, but it was certainly a welcoming environment, and that leads into a beautification event that I attended at Estero High School. Jamie Cairo is a parent coordinator over there, and she is Superwoman who gets all kinds of parent volunteers and all kinds of community volunteers. So there were 2 churches there, Park Alliance Church and Legacy Church. That was like their mission for the week or whatever. They went, and it was a Saturday in Florida, and it was the Saturday when we woke up to thunderstorms. So it was hot and sticky and yucky and gross, and all these people showed up. And what they did was they planted plants and they did stuff in the garden that I don't know how to describe, but to make it look really, really pretty. And we had a lot of donations from businesses, $5,000 grant from Lowe's on Corkscrew and Estero, and other local businesses, Moore's Landscaping and Lawn Care, Coastal Landscaping, and then this man who owns a pressure washing business in Estero was there with his little kids, pressure washing all of the concrete outside the school. And then when I walked in I didn't stay and do the work. I should not admit that out loud, but I did have someplace else to be. Next year I'll go and I'll do the work. So I didn't see the finished product until I walked in the next day at open house and I saw the finished product, and the place was absolutely gorgeous. So just an example of how the good things we can do when we're working with parents, with the community, and with businesses. Lauren, are you here? I love, love, love the countdown on the website to the first day of school. I loved it more 2 weeks ago when it said 14 days until school starts. Now that it says 1 day until school starts, I'm a little panicked, but I also love to tease my kids with it. So every once in a while I'll open the computer and put it in front of them, and they don't necessarily love that, but I don't remember seeing that on the district website before. Not only that, but you've been pushing out a ton of information about back to school that we need, and it's easily consumable, so it's videos. And I've gotten feedback from people like my friends in New York saw your video where you're calling new teachers. They're like, I wish our superintendent would do things like that. He seems like a nice guy. I'd want to work for him. So the impression that you're making on the community is fantastic about our schools in general, and you're also answering questions that I think parents might not even know they have. So I've been very impressed with the push this year. I have a proposal for the board. I'd like to get some consensus from the board. I'd like to ask Mr. Martin to write a letter, not a letter, definitely not a letter, a piece for the news press explaining to the public the basics of the lawsuit that we've joined. Because I've heard some concern amongst the community about, why are we doing this? How are we doing it? Who are we doing it to? That kind of thing. And without revealing legal strategy, I think we've all decided that Mr. Martin will speak to the legal basis of this lawsuit, so I think he's in the best position to do that. Do we have consensus on that?
Yes, board members? Based on a conversation I had with someone yesterday, yes.
Right.
People are not aware.
Right.
Everybody good? Kathleen, Miss Morgan?
Yeah, I'm just wondering about Keith doing it alone. Maybe Keith writing it, but with the superintendent's name and the board chair's name on it.
That's fine.
I agree.
Yes, and Ms. Patrica has spoken to me about this before, and I think I understand the desired message. Just want to be sure, do board members feel the need to review that document, or may I work with Ms. Patrica's review or the chair's review?
I think just Mary Fisher to get the chair.
Yeah, you can get the chair.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, just a couple more things. I went to active shooter training this morning at North Fort Myers High School, and it was unbelievably good. Ken Dobson in the back ran the training. Patrick Hayhurst was there, and another man, Scott Griffin from the Sheriff's Department. He's the active shooter response coordinator from the Sheriff's Department. This was real life. This was hardcore. This wasn't, oh, you know, we're going to lock ourselves in classrooms and hide under desks. And this was serious. It was serious. It was poignant. They used real life examples. And I have a question for everybody in the room. Who here hopes that we never have an active shooter incident in our schools? Raise your hand. Everybody, guess what? Hope is not a strategy. So the point of this whole thing is to have a plan and to actually be prepared. And the way to be prepared is you can't possibly prepare for every single scenario, but keep asking, what if, what if, what if, what if? And the other thing that really stuck with me is that when we do drills on school campuses, they're not drills, they're actually training. Law enforcement will tell you they don't drill for an active shooter, they train so that they know how to respond in that situation. And the only way that we can do that in our schools is if we're constantly training in our minds and through the use of actual physical training in the schools. So really, really impressed with that. It's been a concern of mine since I joined the board, and I have a great deal of relief. I feel that our kids are safe, and you're doing a great job. So thank you. Uncommon Friends Foundation, I'll let Pam talk about that. Backpack event, Pam can talk about that. New teacher orientation and career changer orientation. I went to both of those, and I was super impressed with the training and the level of camaraderie that was being established between and amongst the teachers and between the teachers and the administrators that were there. If I were a new teacher starting in Lee County School District this year, I would be excited to start my job based on what I saw at those two events. So that's it. Thank you.
And thank you. Mr. Toiber?
I have no comments.
Ms. Riviere?
Okay, I'm going to do a tag off of the collaboration at Estero that you were talking about. And this summer, I've had the opportunity to visit trainings in other higher education establishments and other places that have been around and in buildings that are not as old as some of our schools. And the care and the level of cleanliness at our school district is much higher than I see at many of these. And I believe a lot of that has to do with the fact that our custodial staff, I would say the majority of our custodial staff do it because they love our kids and they love our families. There's a different atmosphere, and there's a collaboration that does happen, especially on the outside facilities where the community gets involved and works alongside staff. So I believe the love of the school and the love of the students makes a big difference. Just impressed with that. I also joined Chris for new teacher orientation and the breakfast, and I'm sorry that not all of our new teacher career changers were able to participate in the academy because we had more being hired. But I am so impressed with our staff and the training that they provide and the effort that they took a dream and they turned it into something absolutely amazing for those teachers. Our staff impresses us every day. And backpack event, it was wonderful. Thank you to Nathan Shaker for hosting it. And looking at numbers, the numbers are not as high as they have been in the past. And I'm so proud of our team, especially Ken's group that he had, Ken Dobbins' group that he had, because they were already planning and seeing what can we do to get this throughout the district at different locations so we can better serve and meet the needs of our students, and also the fact that our high school students are also students of need, and we need to make sure that we are able to provide them with some of the basic supplies that they need. We had our advisory board meeting with Human Trafficking Coalition. Steve, I will be getting you information about when the next training will be so that we can be there. I am going to be trained to be a trainer, so I will be able to provide training wherever, along with others. So they are looking for some people who not only want to learn information, but also want to be trained to do training. So it goes throughout. Uncommon Friends, I will just say one specific aspect as it relates to our school district. We need to do what we can to assist Dr. Searle in getting information out to our teachers about the training to teach the curriculum. It has all been coordinated with all of our standards, with our ELA standards, and it also assists us with the character education development. And so we need to really encourage our teachers for going out there, and because our teachers usually, then we have several that have been honored as champion teachers, and the scholarships that are available through Uncommon Friends Foundation are really amazing. Then yesterday, my brain has gone into a fog. Okay, this morning had the opportunity to go to the elementary school counselors meeting and give them a hello and an encouragement to them and let them know we appreciate all that we do. Our school counselors put in more time and effort than many of us give them credit for, and kudos to them for all that they do. Their time, their effort, and those elementary and middle, I just see I know one middle school counselor who is there at 7 o'clock every day and stays until 6 o'clock to assist our kids. And people go above and beyond. It's not about the salary. It's about our kids. Let's see. And then I believe that's it as far as all of the different visitations. The one aspect that did come up to me that we also probably need to consider as we look at legislative priorities has to do with our state constitution is being revised, is in the process of revision. And many of those revision pieces are going to impact our public schools, and we probably need to be proactive to attend their planning meetings. And when you go to the site for they never tell you, I have no idea when the next meeting is going to be. They are not very good at publicizing those and getting that word out. And we need to be proactive to be out there and also letting people know that what they are voting for in next year, it's the 2018 November elections, and really make sure that people are knowledgeable and ready to support us and all that we do in our schools. And that's it.
Thank you. Ms. Morgan?
I have none.
And I just have a couple things. I attended last week the Insurance Task Force, their first one back, and they are the quintessential data-driven group. They analyze, reanalyze, reorganize, look at from different aspects every piece of data that comes in regarding illnesses and how our money's being spent because we are self-insured, and making recommendations. The one piece of data that comes up over and over is that our health program, our healthy lifestyle program, is paying off because insurance costs are down here in Lee County, while everywhere else they're up, and of course we're up to the average amount, but in terms of our own usage, it's paying off. And it's just a wonderful staff and great leadership, and very, very impressive. And I think most of you have been to at least one of the Insurance Task Force meetings, and it's always a treat to be there. And I want to thank Dr. Atkins and all of the staff for your start of school pre-planning, from your phone banks from early morning till late afternoon to your cute little videos on the phone, and then the ethics of, was that an ethics video about using your cell phone and not leaving it places, and all of those things. That was hilarious.
Oh, the mascots?
And having the school mascots there.
Yeah. And the backpack, I attended the backpack thing, and how impressive How impressive. They must have had 20 or 30 hairstylists and barbers in there cutting hair and doing face painting and handing out supplies. It was so well organized. And the staff also from the middle school was phenomenal. The custodian was there just hustling all day long from setup to end. Leonardo Garcia is magnificent. And the dais, thank you. Only I do have a couple changes that I think we need to make. I wanted Dr. Atkins at the table, but he was a little bit closer when he was over here. So anyway, I like it. I love we have our access to our computers and we're right on top of things. And so with that, I will move to Mr. Martin.
Yes, Dr. Cook, board member, seeing that we have plenty of time today, I do have a school law minute, and you'll recall that we've been talking parliamentary procedure for a time, and the most recent opportunity we discussed the motions to be used in the event you wish to change previous action of the school board. The most recent opportunity, we talked about the motion to be used when you wish to change action of the school board taken on that same day, and that was the motion to reconsider. In the event you wish to change action of the board taken at a previous meeting, the tool to be used is the motion to rescind. So for example, if an action was taken on the July 25th meeting, you wished to make a motion tonight to change, the motion would be a motion to rescind. A motion to rescind can be moved by any member regardless of how that member voted on the motion proposed to be rescinded. Motion to rescind requires a second, and it is debatable. It can be discussed. It requires a majority vote if the member announces the intention at a previous meeting to make the motion to rescind. If that announcement was not made, then otherwise it requires a 2/3 vote or a majority of the entire membership. Unlike the motion to reconsider, the adoption of the motion to rescind actually negates the previous action of the board. It's as if that motion, that vote was never taken. If the motion to rescind fails, the previous action stands. The motion to rescind fails, the previous action of the board stands. Finally, the motion to rescind is not appropriate when the action has been taken, when action has been taken as a result of the vote on that main motion. So for example, if a contract has already been entered into, or it was the appointment of an employee such that rights are already established based on that action, it's not appropriate to rescind. That's all I have today. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Atkins.
We're going to have a quiz on motions, if you would, just clear your desk. I would, first of all, I'd like to actually thank Mr. Martin for his assistance. We have a good cause item that is coming forward relative to our mainframe upgrades, which I'll give you a little bit more detail this evening, but he was instrumental in making sure that all of our contracts were up to standard. He has an extremely good eye for that, and I just appreciate his patience and his hard work because we certainly threw him a curveball, and he managed to definitely hit it out of the park. So thank you very much, and also want to thank Trey's team as well. I know they worked super hard, but thank you, sir. I appreciate it. The second, just to give you a couple of what I've been up to relative to some visits, did make it out to South High again. We went out there originally for the administrative meeting, but then we went out for the food service meeting, which I know Mrs. Fisher was able to attend that. That was we're really a volunteer meeting, but South's auditorium was pretty much full. I got to say a few words to the group, but the highlight was certainly the guest speaker, who I heard was phenomenal. I didn't have an opportunity to hear her, but heard that was very well received. So kudos to Sonny Stalmecki and his crew for putting that together. I think it was really worthwhile for everybody who attended that, and also my hats off to Ed Matthews again, who turned right around, hosted another event, and showcased South High. I did get an opportunity to talk to the South High staff, And mentioned a little bit about 7069. We got a lot of your all's involvement, got a big cheer. So you've got a whole high school staff there that was certainly behind you. Over the weekend, I did attend a service at Friendship Missionary Baptist Church, and they had a whole thing on back to school. And I think you would be extremely proud of your kids, leading the prayer and the songs and the dance. And their program was Back to School, Are You Ready? And when I had my opportunity to speak, I said, after going through this service, I feel I am really ready to get back to school. I'm excited. But it was neat. And the other thing this is the first time I visited a number of churches over the years. First time I visited this particular one, but I was again pleasantly surprised at the many friendly faces that I saw at that church. That you go back over a number of years. I've known a lot of these people, but many of them are our employees, and so we're happy to see me there, but also just happy to get the year started. But what struck me was the impact of this district. We are the largest or second largest employer, and we are certainly a large part of the community, and that was a great service to be a part of. I wanted to say hats off to Human Resources. Angela just gave me an update on our hiring, so we're in pretty good shape, and they're still working really hard. But those numbers I've been watching them. She's been updating me throughout the summer, and they continue to come down. So that's a hats off to their staff. And again, as you've heard me say probably many times at this point, I consider myself I put in some long hours, but man, drive around that corner of this building, and then there's still always cars in the parking lot outside of Human Resources. They prepare to get ready for school. Back to the school schedule. Appreciate the nice words about Lauren and her team. They're certainly well-deserved. She's done a fantastic job there. She did have me out visiting ABC recently, so that was this week, so that was a lot of fun. She's got the back-to-school schedule put together, and I'll make sure, if you don't already have that, I'll make sure that you do get it. But we start out at the South Bus Compound at 5 o'clock or 5:30 in the morning, and then we will proceed down to Bonita Springs High School. Then we'll come back up to Franklin Park and welcome the students into Franklin Park, which I'm really looking forward to. Orange River after that, and that's a little time in the cafeteria, and then we're headed out to Colusa Elementary School. So we're going to touch every one of the zones, and then come back and if there's anything coming up, we'll be back here in the building. We do have the operations center where the call centers opened up, so that's our first year for that. So appreciate Mr. Law and his team for putting that together. And having said that, we are looking forward to a wonderful opening day.
Thank you very much. Is there anything for the good of the order, board members? If not, this meeting is adjourned. We'll see you back at 6 o'clock.